Hey, how's it going, guys? This is your boy Haze, and in today's video, we're on the Shadowlands Beta going to be discussing dual wield versus two-hander in PvP scenarios, talking about their strengths and, of course, their weaknesses. So let's go ahead and jump into this video and talk about this. So going over two-hander versus dual wield, we really do need to touch on the talents we're going to be using. As for the level 15 talent, so Inexorable Assault's going to give us quite a bit more burst and a little bit more kill option in our burst window compared to the other two. I see Talon's not really being that great in terms of damage, and Cold Heart being so nerfed in PvP, you don't even really want to touch it. So as for the level 25 talents, Runic Attune for dual wield is definitely my favorite because you can pull quite a bit more runic power based off of the auto attacks of two weapons, which is pretty cool. But as for two-hander, Murderous Efficiency seems to be the way to go because obviously it's not going to hit nearly as much. You're not going to get nearly as much runic power, and having that security during your burst to generate runes off of your killing machine is amazing. It's going to give you 100% uptime during burst. You're not going to have any problems, and it's really going to be good overall for your rotation. As for the level 30 talents, you're either going to be using Asphyxiate, but if you're running Dragon Stun, you definitely want to go Blinding Sleep because obviously the two stuns will DR. So using them both is not generally the best option, especially if your partner has a stun, and then that just goes into triple DR, which ends up being a lot worse than obviously using Blinding Sleep, which will be on a full effectiveness outside of the stuns. As for level 35 talents, Avalanche, it's kind of a toss-up between Avalanche, a little bit more burst pressure, and Frozen Pulse. And the reason being is because Frost Strikes have a potency conduit that generates strength while using Frost Strike. With a two-hander, it's only 1% per Frost Strike. And for some odd reason, well, I mean, it's not really that odd, but for dual wield, it generates 2% strength, stacking up to 5 on a Frost Strike. Being that it has two weapons and it doesn't main hand and offhand attack, it stacks a bit faster. So if you're dumping obliterates into the target and you're, let's say, rune starved, if this happens during burst, it's probably a pretty bad issue, honestly, but most likely you won't be rune starved during burst. Frozen Pulse can give you a little bit more damage if you're really flexing hard between those Frost Strikes and obliterates, which I don't think you'll honestly benefit from that too much either. But the only time you generally use that Howling Blast proc is when you either want to put dots on the targets or you don't have any runic power for a Frost Strike. So with dual wield, you generally are never going to run out of runic power. Like, you're really going to have just as much as you want, especially if you're not using Fallen Crusader Razor Ice and you're running Hysteria for the extra runic power generation. It definitely can give you quite a bit more runic power. So, like, you really don't ever reach that downtime because outside of burst, you're not necessarily just slamming your face on obliterate. You're actually using a lot of Frost Strikes in combat, weaving it in and out, trying to get a KM proc to do a lot more damage. So as for the level 40 talents, Wraithwalk can obviously give you a little bit more speed inside of PvP or like arena situations when you really got to get to the target. Otherwise, I prefer Death Pact just for the heal. It can save your life, obviously, if you're healer CC'd or if you're just like fighting another class 1v1. I don't know how many times I've, pushed myself down to low health, allowing them to push their health down, being like, yeah, I've got this in the bag, and I throw that up at 10%, it just wail on them until they die, and I'm just like, yeah, victory, ends up being pretty good. As for level 45 talents, we've got Glacial Advance. Now with a two-hander, Glacial Advance is the way to go because applying Razor Ice, and since our Obliterate now stacks off of Mastery, makes it deal quite a bit more damage, 15% more damage to be exact. And in terms of overall damage pressure, your Obliterates without, we're going to hit for like 12 to 13k with the two-hander, but with that added on, you're adding on like 1.5 to 2k top end through Glacial Advance, which really brings out kind of, the shining light for two-handed Frost. But overall, it does take quite a while to stack up, which is kind of funny. It's the exact opposite for dual wield. Actually, Razor Ice stacks up pretty fast because generally you have Razor Ice on your main hand, and then your Fallen Crusader is what you switch out if you want to use like Hysteria or something like that, which also brings down your obliterate damage. But we'll get that into talking about that very soon. As for the level 50 talents, I could definitely see dual wield relying either Ice Cap or Obliteration, considering how high obliterate damage has scaled. It does offer quite a bit more burst damage. Outside of just, Chill Streak and things like that, like current BFA dual wield, just the damage just feels very lacking overall in comparison to other classes, and we kind of rely heavily on, let's say, Heartstop Aura to reduce cooldowns of enemies to make our burst actually feel like it's functioning inside PvP, which is why we rely on Ice Cap to decrease the cooldown of our pillar to apply that consistent pressure. But right now, burst pressure is actually so high that you can land kills during CC windows, which is actually really cool because that's a complete change change of what we've been doing, which we've absolutely disliked on the PvP side of things. So obliteration for both specs would definitely be my go-to. In terms of Breath of Syndragoza, obviously it's too easy to CC. It's too predictable, and hitting one button and spamming obliterate during your entire burst window, just mindlessly doing that, doesn't really feel that good to me. So overall PvP, it's not that great right now. Yeah, no good. So let's go ahead and start using these abilities, and I'll go ahead and show you guys exactly like where the strengths lie between the two, and of course their weaknesses. So the overall power of a two-hander is definitely going to lie with Might of the Frozen Waste, which increases your obliterate damage by 30% on your killing machine procs. Now also that comes into play with your obliterate scaling off of mastery, and of course getting 20% more obliterate damage while leveling up through Shadowlands, which increases it by quite a bit. Now it's generally the most amount of strength you're gaining is definitely the mastery scaling on your obliterates, and I can't wait to optimize gear to see that even further, how high we can actually take that. But as we said before, we've got Glacial Advance, which is on a 5.4 second cooldown, so essentially to reach full stacks it's going to take roughly around 25 seconds. Add in the 0.4s, yeah, okay, 27 seconds. But anyways, so getting back to this, we're going to go ahead and stack up our Glacial Advance. Now you can definitely see where kind of like the downfall of two-hander is. Right here in the opener, and this is where kind of dual wield is actually stronger than two-hander inside PvP, and that is if you want to quick burst on a target. Dual wield can set it up so much faster than two-hander for maximized burst pressure. It's kind of actually insane. But in terms of overall burst pressure, if you're quick bursting, both of them are on, I'd say, close to the same level, while two-hander relies heavily on the obliteration damage. I mean, dual wield relies heavily on it too, honestly, in the opener when you're quick bursting. But dual wield applies the frost damage a bit quicker, so if you're like relying on chill streak off the opener, a very quick burst, dual wield can actually set that up faster. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys exactly here on the two-hander. We're going to go ahead and just, open up on the target, just generally beating the target up, doing nothing. Now if you guys think your little ghoul here doesn't do anything, the nice thing about this little guy, and it's kind of like a couple of his hidden strengths are coming out over time, is that he actually manages to grant you procs like trinkets and things like that. I've stood back and watched him DPS and had my trinkets proc and things along those lines. He actually helps proc those things. So he's a good little guy. I mean, overall, he's not terrible, right? So we got to sit here, DPS on the target for around 25 seconds to stack up our Razor Eyes. And this is where two-hander enters that kind of that area where it becomes a lot stronger than dual wield, and it can kind of reach much higher obliterate crits, because that's where that 30% obliterate damage increase is really going to come into play once you're able to grant yourself the same runes as dual wield. Two-hander is capable of bursting for around 16k with this spec, a little bit higher than 16k, which is very strong when it comes to obliterates, considering we have around 30k health pools. My procs right now are just like refusing to procs and line up, so it doesn't matter. But we know the damage. I've done the testing on it quite a bit. And as long as you keep these up, you keep your bursts up, it is a bit harder to play than I'd say dual wield, just under the premise that you actually have to manage a lot of these cooldowns. There's 15.4, there's 15.6. Not bad, not bad. It should push up a bit more, but it's not going to at the moment. Our ghoul failed us with the procs, boys. Our ghoul failed us with the procs. But as you can see there, I mean, if we add in the inoxidable salt damage on the obliterates, that is definitely hitting for well above 16Ks there. Heck, if you get like a 16.4K, which is something I did on the other video, that would easily be like a 17K plus crit with an oxidable assault included, which is very strong. So two-hander strength inside PvP definitely has a lower, slower opener. Now you'll see me in arena fights, like when I'm playing double DPS, I'll switch over to Gathering Storms or Hyperthermic Presence for a little bit more healing, but Gathering Storms for more damage, and I won't rely on Glacial Advance, because if I know the arena match is only going to last 30 seconds, chances are I'm not going to care too much about stacking up to Glacial Advance, because that's going to take 25 seconds, and also if I'm taking pressure, I'm going to have to Death Strike, which will be impossible to keep up Glacial Advance while also Death Striking. Now that's kind of where like the hidden power comes in with dual wield, like the side of the playstyle that is a bit better than two-hander, but in terms of peak burst, peak damage killing potency inside of arena, that big obliterate crit is definitely where a two-hander becomes better than dual wield. It is a bit harder to play. You do have to manage a little bit more, but overall, definitely stronger when it comes to the PvP burst pressure and current I'd say even in 1v1 scenarios, it's definitely going to be better just because of how hard it can hit and how a lot of survivability, mobility a lot of classes has. Being able to deal maximum pressure in a small burst window is definitely more viable than overall DPS with dual wield, kind of like in PvE scenarios. So let's go ahead and jump over to dual wield and start discussing the strength of dual wield and of course its weaknesses. So starting off, the first thing you're going to notice is we're running Razor Ice on main hand, Fallen Crusader on offhand. Now, one of the other things you can run, obviously, is Hysteria on your offhand, which does increase your runic power gain by quite a bit when it comes to dual wield. Now, as I said before, I like using Runic Attune for just overall more runic power for Frost Strikes, because that seems to be one of our main damage windows outside of our burst. Now, being that we have Razor Ice on one of our weapons, we do not need to take Glacial Advance when it comes to dual wield, which is fairly positive, and it becomes a lot more manageable and I'd say new player friendly, that you can go ahead and throw it either on Gathering or Hypo for more healing, or Gathering for more damage, which I'm going to go ahead and throw it on Gathering for this part. But overall, it's fairly the same. Now, the nice thing about this is the quick burst with dual wield is a lot quicker than two-hander's quick burst, and the reason being is you can fully stack Razor Ice and go ham on the target with either Chill Shriek or, let's say, Frostform's Fury Burst, and generally get the majority of the damage pressure even without, you know, that 25-second window with two-hander. And you are able to apply a bit more pressure straight up. So if I was like BGing or something like that, this would, quick bursting would become very handy in terms of dual wield. And being that it also has increased obliterate damage compared to Battle for Azeroth, and if you like to dual wield more than two-hander inside PvP, this is also going to give you more of a burst avenue, or a better burst avenue window than you previously were playing with, which is really nice to see, especially when it comes to dual wield, because that's kind of one of the things I liked about dual wield in the past, was it also had that burst pressure at certain points, either whether it was inlaid into Frost Strikes, or at this point we're even seeing a strong obliteration dual wield build, which is fairly cool. Now we're going to go ahead and open up on this target. We're going to go ahead and show you like peak burst, the reason why two-hander is stronger. Obviously, we've talked about that a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and open up on this target here. We're going to go ahead and just throw out some consistent normalized little pressures. You can see there we've already got 5 stacks of Razor Ice, which is a lot faster than two-hander. We've managed to get a Unholy Strength proc. Now obviously trinkets and stuff like that will make it even stronger, but we can go ahead and throw up a quick burst on this target and still do quite a bit of DPS. As you can see, we're hitting for around 11Ks at the moment, which really isn't bad. We've got trinkets up. We are only missing a single trinket on those procs to actually hit the larger obliterates, which when dual wield, the largest obliterates I'm generally hitting are around like 12.6k with the Nocturnal Assault added in. That's around 13k, which does fall around 4 to 3k shorter than obviously two-hander's peak dual wield, which does make it a bit weaker when it comes in terms of granting killing windows. But overall, I'd have to say it's not a terrible spec by any means. It's actually doing quite a bit of pressure. I can definitely see how it would have what word are we looking for? It would definitely have the capabilities of killing other classes inside of Arena. Now, let's say we wanted to use Hysteria over Fallen Crusader. Now, the big downfall to using Hysteria over Fallen Crusader is you are going to lose more obliterate damage, which is terrible because that's kind of like your bread and butter for killing another target inside of PvP situations. So instead of hitting for, 12.6k, it's going to drop down, 1 to 2k damage on your obliterates inside of your burst window, which is going to put you around 10k, which is hitting for about a third weaker than using a two-hander inside PvP instances, which doesn't really feel that great. But the runic power gain actually feels pretty strong, so maybe in the future when we get a little bit more potency conduits that increases our Death Strike healing, having a massive amount of runic power pool could definitely be beneficial in the future. But as currently, I do not like the feeling of it. I mean, the runic power is awesome. I mean, I can't argue with that. The runic power absolutely feels great, but not having Fallen Crusader is painful. It's absolutely painful hitting for 7-8Ks during burst. Like, it definitely reduces your burst damage by quite a bit not having Fallen Crusader to scale off of strength. Now, obviously, if you're playing Necrolord, this would have a much bigger effect, being that Necrolord damage is also based off of an extra 15% strength scaling when you throw out your Necrolord grip. And that's why I'm comparing these two with Kyrian, because two-handed Frost would definitely have a bit better time using Grippy Grip than dual wield would, just based off of this is mastery and the other one's strength scaling. But overall, Yeah, honestly, I could see viable ways to play both of these builds, but currently I do like the enhanced burst of two-hander. I do like the top end of those big obliterate crits, and I know a lot of people do. I'd say probably 80% of the DK population prefers the big obliterates over the dual wield playstyle, but dual wield definitely has viable means of playing in current PvP, which is really cool. And even when it comes to, like, let's say battleground brawling, I could definitely see this being a very viable option, being that it increases your overall survivability in comparison to two-hander, and of course your runic power gain, which would keep you alive longer. Now, if PvP were to scale down and people did a lot less damage and consistent pressure became overall stronger, I could definitely seeing the dual wield build becoming more viable in the future as, let's say, death strike healing increased. Hopefully it does, because it's really weak right now, and obviously that's another reason why playing two-hander and having just the overall burst potential would be better, because we can't necessarily rely on survivability at the moment, especially with classes one-shotting each other. Doesn't necessarily end very well, and it seems like putting out outgoing pressure seems to be the majority of the counter to just countering burst, which is really odd to see that happening. But anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I want to kind of break down two-handed versus dual wield in PvP on the beta. So let me know in PvP, what are you guys most excited for? That big two-handed burst, or that overall consistency slash survivability that dual wield brings to the table? And of course, leave a like, subscribe for more future Frosty K content. And of course, until next time, guys, this was your boy Hazzed.